Okay, so I want to go ahead and explain the prompt for Major Essay Project 2. So let me go ahead and click on this here in the module. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read through and pause intermittently to explain some of the concepts, clarify some things as we go through. So let me go ahead and jump in. In On Confronting the Unknown, Richard E. Miller and Ann Juresic write that the writing prompt, properly conceived, is an invitation to embark into unmapped worlds, to improvise, to find unexpected beauty in the challenges that arise. In this essay project, we are challenged to write a research-based argument of at least 5 full pages that explores a particular aspect of a topic that genuinely interests us. And just a little note, if this were normal face-to-face meetings, this would be 8 full pages. So I guess that's 1 plus to the global health crisis, but anyway, moving on. Typically, in a research-based essay, we may be tempted to choose a position in a debate and find evidence to support our position. This model is the basis for the 5-paragraph essay, a model we are no longer using. However, as Miller and Juresic explain in Habits of the Creative Mind, we know that practicing argument as debate produces writing that isn't persuasive, or compelling, or interesting to read. So in our classes, we ask our students to think of essay writing as a speculative journey. What's the difference? When you write speculatively, you begin not with a predetermined destination, your thesis, but with the goal of answering a question or solving a problem. You consider different routes to get to this goal. You do research and rethink your plan. You learn more and more. You write, make mistakes, and head off in new and unanticipated directions. You make discoveries. Your paper is your attempt to come to some kind of answer to your question. How are you putting pieces of information together to create new meaning? How are you connecting different ideas together to create new ideas? So let me pause and just explain some of these things here. So you'll notice this quotation from the essay in Habits of the Creative Mind on argument as journey, right? And so Miller and Juresic talk about this idea of argument as debate. Now, usually that's how we've been trained or conditioned to think about argument. It's just picking a side to an issue and trying to find evidence to support that side to prove that you're right and the other side is wrong, right? The goal in that type of writing is not really to learn, but just to be right. However, as they point out, and I concur with them, that type of writing usually isn't very persuasive. Often we feel like we're being yelled at as a reader, and so we're not persuaded, we're turned off by it. It's not very compelling, meaning it's not interesting and interesting to read. It's not something we generally care about, right? But if we're practicing argument as a speculative journey, we're more apt to put pieces together in interesting ways, and we're not trying to prove that we're right about something. We're merely showing our understanding of something to our readers, how we're putting these pieces together. And so what we call that when we're putting pieces of different things together to create new things, to create new meaning, we call that synthesis, or to synthesize, right? So that means we're combining ingredients to create something new. So I like to use the analogy of baking a cake. So if we just put all of our ingredients that go into a cake on the counter, we have our flour, our butter, our eggs, all sugar, all that stuff, and just lay them all right out next to each other, that doesn't make a cake, right? It's all the ingredients that goes into a cake, but we need to actually combine those ingredients in the right amounts, at the right times, the right temperatures, etc., to create that thing that we call the cake. And if we did it right, then we get a cake. So that's what synthesis is. You're putting pieces together to create something new. So that's what we're challenged to do in this essay project. So that's why it's also really important to find a topic that genuinely interests us, something that we truly care about, because it's going to make the research process a lot more rewarding for you because you're actually trying to learn, and consequently it will make it a much more enjoyable experience for your reader because you're taking them on a journey. It's apparent that you care about this issue, and so in turn that transfers in the writing. So let me go ahead and continue here. The goal for this writing project is not to try to convince or persuade your readers that your position is right. When released from the burden of trying to persuade our readers, we can then use our writing as a way of learning for us, which ultimately is one of the most important purposes of writing. And that's basically what the whole premise of Habits of the Creative Mind is, right? Using writing as a way of learning for us. This will also influence the tone you take in your essay. Seek to build an invitational tone, meaning a tone where you're inviting your reader along, not a confrontational, adversarial, or arrogant tone. So when we have that burden of trying to prove that we're right, this typically is the type of tone we take. Conversely, though, we're not trying to prove we're right. We're just trying to take our readers on a journey of how we came to greater understanding of something. So we're seeking to build an invitational tone. Okay, let me continue. Begin by doing some exploratory research about a topic that interests you, an event, a concept or idea, a cultural phenomenon, or potential solutions to a problem. As Miller and Jurecic suggest in their book, begin in a state of not knowing rather than committing yourself to a claim you came up with before you've done any curiosity-driven research. After a while, questions about this topic should arise. Craft an open-ended question about your topic. Open-ended questions can't be easily answered and require careful research and consideration. Embrace confusion and complexity. Don't shy away from the gray areas of an issue, meaning don't shy away from things that might be confusing to us. Again, the sites of learning often occur at those sites of confusion. If we're actually embracing it, we're trying to understand it, right? So going along with this, it's really important to begin by doing some exploratory research, not formulating some kind of position ahead of time, but rather having some sort of question about some kind of topic or issue within a topic that we want to try to learn more about, right? So it's important to just explore a little bit in the initial phases of research. So beginning in a state of not knowing rather than committing ourselves to a claim we came up with before we've done any of that research. That's, again, the method of the 5-paragraph essay, and we're moving well beyond that, right? Now the open-ended questions, let me just clarify that a little bit. An open-ended question is something that you can't just ask Google for the answer for and then, oh, okay, well that's the answer. An open-ended question is something that has possibly many different responses that are equally as valid, right? So based on the type of research you do, based on the evidence you find, based on how you're putting those pieces together, you can have any number of responses that could be equally as valid. It just really depends, right? So the open-ended question really is to help propel your research forward, because if you have a question that's not easily answered, you want to try to find out how to answer it, right? And so therefore you're compelled to research different bits of information, perspectives, pieces of evidence, things to try to weigh the merit of those different things and see how you can devise some kind of satisfactory response to the question, right? So let me continue. We are challenged to incorporate material from at least 5 credible and relevant texts, 3 of which should be found using the library's online databases. So I'm going to go ahead and create a video where I'll show you these online databases using the Long Beach City College library website, most notably Gale eBooks and Opposing Viewpoints and EBSCOhost. But let me just finish this little paragraph here. Gale eBooks and Opposing Viewpoints are good starting points. They're useful for providing background information and pointing us in the direction of other sources, but also use EBSCOhost to find some of your sources. How can you work with the words of others to promote thinking new thoughts? So again, yeah, Gale eBooks, Opposing Viewpoints, EBSCOhost, those are all really great databases that have a whole bunch of different bits of credible information on any range of topics. So again, I'll create a video and show you how to use that, access that. But for this paper, we need to have at least 5 credible and relevant texts, and 3 of those, at least 3 of them, need to come from those online databases. All 5 can come from there, and if you wanted to have more than 5, that's fine too, but at least 5 credible and relevant texts, and at least 3 of those from the library databases. Before committing to a topic, think about your own interests in the world. What are your career goals? What are your hobbies? What sparks your curiosity and imagination? Topics that we have a personal stake in tend to be more interesting to research and write about, and consequently more interesting for our audience to read about. Rather than researching the topic generally, however, try to find a specific conflict, issue, or question within this topic. We want to be as narrow and specific as we can for such a short paper. So again, this is really important that you are focusing on a topic you really care about, something you're really interested in. A great starting point is to think about just what you're interested in the world. So if that is sports or music or comic books or cooking or astronomy, whatever the case is, start there and think, okay, is there something within that would be interesting to you? Also think about your career goals. You know, if you're planning to go into nursing or to be a teacher or any number of different career options, that could also influence what you might want to research and focus on, right? I'm hoping that you're all planning on going into a career you actually are interested in, right? So that's really important. Think about something you actually care about, because it's going to be much more rewarding and enjoyable for you. Usually what happens if we choose a topic that we don't really care about just because we think it's going to be easy or we think the teacher wants to read about it, it usually has the reverse effect where it's much more difficult and just not a very rewarding experience. So we don't want that. Now, something else to think about, we want to try to be as specific as we can with these topics. Because 5 pages may seem kind of like a lot, but really it's not. It's just a drop in the bucket as far as paper length goes. So we want to make sure that we're focused on one particular aspect of something. So an analogy I like to use to kind of help conceive of this is looking at a map of the United States, for example. So if we're looking at a map that's posted on a wall, let's say it's a map that's 5 feet by 4 feet, and we're looking at it from across the room, we'll say 20 feet away, we can see the general outline of the United States. We might be able to tell where certain states are, even certain cities, but we can't really see a lot of the details, right? But if we zoom in on Southern California, for example, we can then see where Long Beach is. And then if we get even closer where Long Beach City College is, and even closer where LAC versus PCC are, right? So we then can see the finer details of that. So it's important that we're focused on one particular aspect of a topic, not trying to talk about the whole thing overall, right? Because 5 pages, again, just isn't enough space for that. Okay, let's continue. Note, there are certain topics that we may not write about, not because they are unimportant issues, but because they tend to lead us into dogmatic or ideological corners that are hard to get out of. These topics include abortion, so whether or not abortion is right or wrong, gun control, whether or not we should have gun control, the death penalty, whether or not that's right or wrong, the benefits or disadvantages of immigration, the existence of a God or afterlife, among a few others. The arguments for these issues tend to be repetitive, and if you have a particular angle regarding one of these topics that you think will lead you into new territory, let's talk about it first. All topics should be approved before you begin the composition of your essay. So again, just to reiterate, these topics, I'm not suggesting they're not important. Indeed, they're very important. That's why they've been hotly contested and debated for decades and decades and decades, even centuries in some cases. But the arguments tend to be repetitive, and so we're not really using that as a mode of learning because we already have usually pretty fixed views on these things already before we've even gone into it, right? And so it can be really hard to get out of that mode of thinking. So those topics we want to avoid. But guess what? The entire cosmos of ideas is your playground. So there's a lot of things that you guys can focus on. Again, I want you to send me a message on Canvas with your ideas about your topic. Especially if you're not really sure, so we can bounce ideas off of one another. I can ask you some questions, things to help you narrow it down a little bit. But we want to make sure that you let me know ahead of time. This essay project is your chance to put into practice all the concepts we've been reading and learning about so far this semester and to challenge our capabilities as writers, students, and thinkers. Be sure to review your notes and reread important selections we've covered from Habits of the Creative Mind and the Little Seagull Handbook. Resist your familiar habits and practices as writers. Try something new and exciting. Follow your curiosity. Take risks. And attempt to have fun while composing this essay. And I didn't mean this last bit in a sarcastic way. I really want you guys to try to use this as a way of fun learning for you, because ultimately that's what learning should be. That's the ideal, right? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and then in the next one I'll pick it up and go over the challenges here. So hang tight for part 2.